Pack up. You're leaving now." My mother-in-law spat the words as she ripped my baby out of my arms. "We're done here." "The divorce is already final," my husband added with that smug, satisfied grin. My vision swam, the room spinning, until a voice echoed in my memory. "I'm 56 today, running a busy community center on the outskirts of Minneapolis. People call me tough, resilient, a woman who built a life from nothing." But when my granddaughter tilts her head and asks, "Grandma, what were you like when Mom?" Well, Sylvia was a baby, the air drains from my lungs. Because to answer her, I have to go back to the winter I thought my child was lost forever, and to the man I despised, who stepped forward when no one else would. 33 years ago, I was just 23, working as a junior nurse in a small hospital in Duluth. My family introduced me to Harold at a church picnic. Everyone praised him as a good catch, heir to a big family farm, steady, polite, dependable. But I didn't love him. Not even close. At my engagement party, my aunt leaned in and whispered, "Stability lasts longer than romance, dear." I wanted to believe that. Within months, I was married and living in a creaky farmhouse, far from the lake and the friends I'd grown up with, surrounded by endless rows of corn and soybeans. From the very first morning, the house felt like a cage. Harold's mother, Helen, inspected everything I did, the cooking, the laundry, even the way I folded napkins. "No wonder Harold looks pale," she'd mutter, eyeing my casseroles. "This tastes like hospital food." She'd leave little notes criticizing my housekeeping, tucking them under the sugar bowl. Harold, who seemed confident when it was just the two of us, shrank into a nervous boy whenever Helen entered the room. He'd nod along with her scolding, then shoot me a look that begged, "Don't make this worse." Frank, Harold's father, was a tall, weathered man who always smelled faintly of hay and machine oil. At first, I thought he might be on my side. But whenever Helen raised her voice or Harold snapped at me, Frank would quietly slip away. Another silent wall in that suffocating house. I told myself I could endure it. Divorce wasn't something women in my family did. You bore the weight. You worked harder. You prayed. Then I got pregnant. Helen, icy as stone until then, suddenly softened, but only enough to serve her own comfort. One morning over coffee, she said, "It'll be better for the baby if you spend a little time at your parents' house. Less stress for you and for me." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Still, the thought of leaving, even briefly, sent a jolt of hope through me. The night before I left, Harold pulled me aside. "Don't forget whose child you're carrying," he warned, voice low and sharp. "Don't embarrass us while you're there." I clenched my jaw and nodded, but inside I was giddy with relief. For the first time since our wedding, I was going home. No one came to see me off the next morning. Not Harold. Not Helen. I dragged my suitcase and a bag of baby clothes to the bus station by myself. But when I reached the platform, someone was waiting. "Frank, I took the bus in from town," he said simply. "Your parents live a long drive from here. Be careful on the road." I blinked, stunned. He had barely spoken to me in all those months, and now here he was, standing in the cold like some awkward guardian. "Thank you," I whispered. He hesitated, then added quietly, "If it ever gets too hard, don't force yourself to come back. Ask your family to protect you if you need it." The tears came then. For the first time, someone in that house actually saw me. "I'll be fine," I managed, wiping my cheeks. "Have a safe delivery," he said, before turning away. And then I was on the bus, watching the farmland slide past like a curtain falling shut. At my parents' home, the air smelled of cinnamon and fresh laundry. My mother fussed over me. My father built a pine cradle with his own hands. For the first time in months, I slept without fear of footsteps outside my door. When Sylvia was born, a tiny, perfect baby girl with a full head of dark hair, all the pain and terror vanished. "It's a girl," the nurse smiled, placing her in my arms. Strong lungs. I pressed her to my chest and whispered, "Sylvia." "My Sylvia." Days later, Harold called. "Glad that's over," he said flatly. "We've picked the name. I'll handle the paperwork." He didn't ask how I was. Didn't ask to hear his daughters cry. The safety of home suddenly felt fragile again. Weeks slipped by, my mother's lullabies filling the nights. but I knew I couldn't stay forever. I packed Sylvia's clothes and mine, my heart heavy. On that bus ride back, I reminded myself of Frank's words, his warning, and his faint glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't be entirely alone. No one met me at the station. Balancing Sylvia on one arm and my duffel bag on the other, I trudged up the gravel drive. The farmhouse looked the same, only colder. Helen opened the door, smiling a smile I didn't trust. "Oh, you're back earlier than expected. Hand me the baby." Before I could protest, she whisked Sylvia from my arms and disappeared into the living room. Her voice floated back. "Her name is Sylvia. Isn't she precious?" I stepped inside, still clutching my bags. Harold stood by the window, arms folded. "Welcome back," he said dryly. "Thanks for handling the hard part." "Long time no see," I answered, my voice trembling. Then his next words landed like a blade. "We're getting divorced." "What?" "The house is already sold," Helen called out from the other room. "Pack your things. You're leaving. The baby stays with us." My legs nearly gave out. "No, you can't. She's mine. Please." "You're not stable enough," Harold said coldly. "I'll take custody." I stumbled toward the living room, desperate, but Helen blocked the doorway, clutching Sylvia out of reach. "Don't make a scene," she hissed. "This is decided." I pleaded through sobs, my arms aching with emptiness. "Please, please don't take her away from me." And then, behind Helen, a voice like thunder cut through the air. "Give her the child." It was Frank. His tone, deep and unshakable, filled a house that had only ever known whispers and commands. Helen froze mid-step. Sylvia wriggled in her arms. Frank stepped forward, steady but absolute. "Give her the child," he said again. Helen's mouth opened. "Frank, don't." I said, "Give her the baby." The room held its breath. Then, with a sharp exhale and panic flashing in her eyes, Helen reluctantly passed Sylvia over. Frank cradled her gently against his shoulder before turning to me. "Take her. Hold her tight." Hands trembling, I stepped forward. The moment my daughter was back in my arms, her warm cheek pressed against my chest, something inside me finally steadied. I looked up at Frank, unable to speak. "Come back inside," he said firmly. "Now." I hesitated. For months, this house had been nothing but cold judgment, manipulation, and cruelty. But Frank's voice had changed the air. Slowly, I stepped through the doorway. Helen stood rigid by the couch, glaring like I had dragged dirt into her pristine living room. Harold paced behind her, jaw clenched. "What is this, Dad?" Harold snapped. "She already left. She was gone for weeks." "Sit down," Frank ordered, his voice calm but leaving no room for refusal. "Both of you." When they hesitated, he added, "Don't make me say it again." Harold slumped into the armchair. Helen didn't sit, but she stopped moving. Frank's gaze swept over them. "You think I didn't know what you two were plotting," he said quietly. "You think I couldn't hear the late-night calls, the whispers in the barn, the talk about that woman from before?" Harold's face flushed. "That's not." "You plan to use Diana," Frank cut in, "to take her child, then toss her aside and go back to a woman more convenient. A woman who can't have children. Isn't that right?" Helen gasped. "How dare you?" "How dare I?" Frank's eyes burned. "You let her carry your grandchild, give birth alone, and then you tried to rip that baby from her arms the moment she returned. You think I didn't hear you bragging about selling this house behind her back?" Harold jumped to his feet. "It wasn't like that. She abandoned us." "Shut your mouth, Harold," Frank thundered. I sat frozen, clutching Sylvia, stunned. The man who always walked away when conflict erupted was now standing in front of me, shielding me from the people who tried to destroy me. "You never even went to see your daughter when she was born," Frank said, his voice sharp as steel. "Didn't ask about the delivery. You don't deserve to be her father." Helen tried again. "You're taking her side? She's an outsider." "She's the only one who did right by this family," Frank shot back. "You, Helen, turned this house into a battlefield. And you, Harold, you're no man at all. You hide behind your mother like a coward." Helen reached for Harold's arm. "He's your son." "And this is my house," Frank cut her off, pulling a thick envelope from the table. "You're both leaving. There's enough money in here to help you start over. But that's it. One payment. After that, you stand on your own. You're throwing us out? Helen's voice cracked. At our age, Frank, that's cruel. What's cruel is what you did to her, Frank said without blinking. Helen collapsed onto the couch, stunned. Harold's face went pale, like the light had gone out inside him. Frank turned to me, holding out another envelope. Divorce papers. Harold's already signed. Whether you add yours is your choice. But either way, this marriage is finished. Harold shook with rage. You ruined everything. All of it. No, I whispered. You ruined yourself. I pressed Sylvia tighter against me and looked at Frank. Thank you. He looked away, his jaw tight. You'll have to decide your next step. But tonight, you stay here. Not with the newborn. That night, I slept in a guest room upstairs, a space Helen had always declared off limits. Sleep never really came. Sylvia stirred every hour, and each time she cried, I braced for Helen's knock, her cutting remarks, her glare. But the house stayed silent. This silence felt different. This silence felt safe. By morning, Harold and Helen were gone. Their suitcases disappeared. Their bedrooms stood open, abandoned. I didn't ask where they went. For days I remained, unsure of my future, afraid to return to my parents' home with even more shame to unpack. Frank never said much, but every evening he sat across from me at dinner. Sometimes he asked about Sylvia's feeding schedule. Sometimes he just nodded and said quietly, "You're doing fine." A week later, he knocked gently on my door, soft, careful, like someone who knew not to startle. Without Helen beside him, he looked smaller somehow, but also more human. "Do you have a minute?" he asked. I followed him down to the back porch. Beyond us, the field stretched wide and endless. The wheat stretched behind the barn like waves of gold, fading into twilight. Sylvia was asleep upstairs. "I hope you're settling in," he said. "I'm trying. But there's something I wanted to ask," I answered slowly. He hesitated, then said, "This land, there's more of it than I'll ever use. I want you to choose a place that feels right to you and build your own home there." I blinked in shock. "What?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "I know you're no longer part of this family, but Sylvia is. She's my granddaughter, and after all that's happened, I want to leave something for both of you. You don't need to decide today, but if you want it, the land is yours." My throat tightened. I don't even know what to say. "You don't owe me anything," he said softly, "except one thing." I raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" "Let me stay in her life. Let me be her grandfather. I want to see her grow up." Tears burned at the back of my eyes. After everything, I had expected to leave with nothing. Instead, he was offering us a future, not from guilt, but from something deeper. Maybe even redemption. "You can," I whispered. "Of course you can." Frank gave a single nod. "That's all I need." We stood together in silence as the sun sank behind the wheat fields. For the first time in what felt like forever, I believed things might be okay. I chose a spot on the edge of Frank's land, where birch trees touched the water's edge. It was quiet there, the breeze rustling the leaves like a whisper. Frank helped clear the ground, and local contractors, who had worked with the family for years, pitched in at a discount. Nobody asked questions. Nobody pitied me. And that meant everything. I didn't try to rebuild what was lost. I created something new. My home was small, filled with light and warmth. A single story with wide windows, open shelves, and a sunlit nursery for Sylvia. My parents didn't want to move from Duluth. The memories there were too strong. But they visited often, staying for weeks. My mom helped with bath time, while my dad hand-carved a crib for Sylvia. Slowly, life found a rhythm again, like a second chance. Frank visited nearly every day. Not as a guard, not even just as a neighbor, but as a grandfather. He'd bring eggs or jars of homemade jam, then sit on the porch, bouncing Sylvia on his knee as he hummed old folk tunes. Our bond was hard to name. He wasn't a father figure. He wasn't technically family anymore. But he was there, and that mattered more than I'd realized. Sometimes I caught myself thinking, if Harold had been different, maybe we could have had something good. But then I'd stop. If Harold hadn't been who he was, if Helen hadn't been who she was, I would never have discovered what it meant to survive. I never would have built this life. I didn't wish for the pain, but I was grateful for what it revealed. When Sylvia was around 3, I felt a stirring inside me. Not dissatisfaction, more like a part of me waking up again. I remembered what it felt like to work, to contribute, and I remembered the fear of being alone, pregnant, terrified, and with no one to ask for help. I didn't want other women to face that same isolation. One night, after dinner, with Sylvia asleep upstairs, I told Frank my idea. I want to start something. A center for moms like me. For women left behind, or raising children alone. A place where they can breathe, find support, and still hold on to dignity. Frank studied me, then asked, "What do you need?" "Land. Some startup funds. Time. You have all 3, he said firmly. "If this is what you want, I'll back it." He didn't say it as a favor. He said it as a promise. Within a year, we broke ground. The first building wasn't fancy, just a sturdy place with softwood floors, a bright playroom, and private spaces for rest. But it was ours. I called it the Willow House. People came, mothers, teachers, retired nurses, volunteers who believed in second chances. Word spread. Donations followed. Soon we added an overnight shelter, a kitchen training program, and a small daycare for working moms. Later, I bought the property next door and opened a late-night pharmacy and grocery, the only one open past 7 p.m. in the county. I didn't just want to help women. I wanted to rewire the way our town supported them. Some called me a success story, but I knew better. It was Frank's steady faith that lit the spark. And it was Sylvia, her laughter, her tiny fingers wrapped around my thumb, that carried me through the doubts. I never heard from Harold again. No letter. No knock on the door. I don't know where Helen ended up either. Maybe they started fresh somewhere else. Maybe they stayed broken. I don't wish them harm. I don't even need answers. Their chapter ended. Mine continued. As years passed, Frank grew older. His knees stiffened, his eyesight dimmed, but he never missed a Sunday dinner. Sylvia adored him. He taught her how to fish, to patch a tire, to recognize wild herbs. When she scraped her knees, she ran to him. When she got her college acceptance, she told him first. He cried harder than I did. Once, when she was 10, I overheard Sylvia ask him, "Grandpa Frank, are you married to my mom?" He laughed. "Lord, no. I'm far too stubborn for your mother." She thought about it, then said, "But you love her, don't you?" "I do," he said, "in the way that matters." That night, sitting on the porch, I asked him, "Do you regret it? Forcing them out?" He shook his head without pause. "I regret not doing it sooner." I smiled. "That's fair. You think I made the right choice?" he asked. I looked at the glow from our windows, the toy tricycle on the lawn, the framed photos of women who'd found new lives through Willow House. "I think it saved us," I said. Frank passed peacefully in his sleep while Sylvia was in college. He left everything to her, the land, the barns, the cabin by the lake. In his will, he called her my heart's second chance. I found a letter tucked inside the envelope, and for the first time in years, I wept. Now, decades later, Sylvia is married. She built her home just down the path from mine. My parents are gone, but I hear them still in the way I braid my granddaughter's hair, or in the Sunday roasts I slow cook with patience. The Willow House has grown into a full campus now, a library, a garden, even a legal clinic. I don't run it anymore, but when I visit, people still greet me as Miss Diana. Sometimes I sit on my porch, listening to the birch trees whisper in the wind. I think back to that cold morning at the bus station when I believed no one would care if I disappeared. I think about Harold's voice, commanding me to know my place. I think about the moment Frank said, "Give her the child now."